was a long time ago.
I'm going to be very honest about this one.
I feel like the hardest part is before you even start.
I was the only student.
I was thinking that I do this for nothing.
It was hard.
So it takes me more than a month to understand the prerequisites and everything.
You have enough of time for you to struggle.
I don't like writing things up.
I had lower expectations from myself.
There's no Shwabe without crypto.
I was completely sold.
I just persevered.
I quit.
It's not the end of the world.
I think it's still a permanent and an ongoing struggle.
I'm going to be very honest about this one. So the hardest part for me was, developing confidence and feeling that I can do this. Because I came from, I'd studied at a small local engineering college in like a small town in India, which wasn't very famous, or I felt very underprepared when I came into graduate school. And I didn't have any role models or seniors, either from my college or from my extended family. I came from a fairly traditional background where, typically girls did not even have a serious career. So I did not at all imagine myself ever as a scientist. I always thought, this is something that you read about in the books. Like I never thought it could ever be me. So overcoming that, mentality and developing confidence, I think this was for me the hardest thing.
I had a difficult PhD, but in non-standard ways. So I started my PhD, and after one semester, went to Israel to visit people at the IDC and stayed there for the next 2.5 years. So I spent the first 3 years of my PhD basically abroad. And there was a lot going on in my life, I guess, at the time, so that was complicated, but for its own reasons, because I was sort of like traveling a lot and had all these other responsibilities. So I had like a very, I was really bad with meeting the requirements, and this stressed me out a lot, I think, like qualifying exams and stuff like this. But yeah, it's sort of, I just didn't pay attention to it, and it worked. I think it worked out better. So rather than worrying about, I think it's easy to like worry about the requirements and the milestones and sort of, I mean, maybe this helps some people to sort of gauge what they should be doing. But like, I just sort of like went like head first into research, and then like, like 5 years later, like came up for air, and like, it was like, oh, like, well, you could be done if you want, basically. And I think that for me, this approach, like rather than worrying about anything along the way and sort of trying to chart a path, I don't know if this is good advice, but for me, it was helpful, I think. I think if I had tried to structure, I don't know if this is really answering your question. I don't know what the hardest part is, to be honest. Yeah. I feel like the hardest part is before you even start. You have to make this decision, like you're deciding what school to go to. And so like this is like this, I don't know how you make this. I had the benefit, I was a master's student, as I said, and then I went to this Simons semester on cryptography, and so I got to like meet people at all these different schools and spend like all of this time with them. And so then when I was deciding to like what to do for a PhD, like I had like a very strong, clear perspective, and I had some perspective about what I wanted to do, who I got along with, and like I had like this real perspective. I feel like, I don't know if you don't, but I was in a very unique position. I was very fortunate. I think like this like unknown, you want to do research, but like you don't really know what you want to do before you do it. So it's like hard to get started. It's really hard to get started. It's only like after you start working on something that you know whether you like it or not, basically. So it's like you get lucky or not. But it seems like it's very significant. I don't know. Yeah, I guess I think the most important thing is, yeah, but even when you're starting your PhD and yeah, you don't have a lot research track record under your belt yet, I don't know. I think it's really important to make sure you're doing things you like. I think it's so easy to get burnt out. And so you really need to make sure that you're doing things that are interesting all the time to you. It doesn't matter like so much if anyone else thinks it's interesting. If you think it's interesting, that's enough. Like you just need to figure out the right way to write it. But if you think if it's enough to engage you, then and you made it in, you were able to be admitted to the PhD program, then it's probably interesting. So and other people will find it interesting. But I think just to like keep just to be engaged. It's hard at first because everything is so like you don't. There's so many. This space is so big and overwhelming. There's so many people that seem famous, and I don't know. And it's hard. I guess. So I went to Simons before I even started my PhD. I met everyone. I really am a firm believer that like you should be like traveling and networking and meeting as many people as possible all the time, not just like burying yourself in research. More so than reading other people's papers. I think like going to conferences and talking with people, even if it's not about research, is so important. It just makes you so much more excited to do the work. And you make connections and you start like nothing like, don't worry too much about how it's immediately happening, but like, you'll have a conversation, have another conversation, a year and a half later. And then like suddenly you're like working on some very cool project, a year after that like wouldn't have happened if these like weird conversations, like, basically like cocktail conversations, like hadn't proceeded. Otherwise like you would have never made this connection. And
I don't know, something that was quite discouraging at times, at least in the beginning, I guess it's collisions, right? So like if you want to work on hot topics, then it's very likely that I guess either we'll have like collisions with other works, or in the worst case, just like get scooped. And it happens, and especially when you're a young student, this could be very frustrating. But believe me when I say that it's not the end of the world. It has happened to me a lot, like, you get used to it. It happens to everyone, not just me. And then there are actually like good sides to this. So often it sort of like drives you to push yourself harder. Competition could be good. And also it often leads to collaborations that otherwise wouldn't have happened.
I think that hardest during the PhD for me was really to negotiate what I wanted with what is useful in the field, or what makes sense in the field. So on the one hand, I needed to kind of develop my own inner logic. Where do I want to go as a researcher? What matters to me? What appeals to me technically? What is fun? But then also kind of look around at what is valued in the field. How do other people see what is important? And in addition to that, there are all these norms in the field. There are all these tiny norms for how you write a paper and how you give a talk, and to really develop my own research direction and my own personality and style and way of being a part of this bigger community, both in terms of content of research, as well as in terms of of style and being, and so this was very difficult for two reasons. One is that I didn't have the information of how the whole community works. It's a lot of information, and it takes a lot of time to figure this out. But the second part is that I had no idea. I had no idea what interests me, what appeals to me, what I wanted. So if I had a clear idea of what I wanted and what makes sense to the community, it would probably have been very fast to negotiate the two. But I really also needed to figure out what I wanted and what I found interesting. So firstly, I think I cannot say that this is a difficulty that I've overcome. I think it's still a permanent and an ongoing struggle. I can be very excited about something, but then will other people find it interesting? What do other people think about the things I find interesting? So what I'll often do is I'll reach out to people whose opinion I value and I trust, and I encourage them to criticize my thoughts and to criticize my work and to engage in a conversation that helps me figure out what the perspective of other people is and how it can make my work more useful. And in terms of norms and styles, and I really spoke with a lot of different people, and I asked them, how do you do this? How do you think about this? How do you approach this? How do you feel about this? What's your experience with this? And talking to a lot of people and learning how they think helped me find my way, and also gave me this the sense of belonging that I developed in this lovely community.
I think many people doing theory research would struggle quite a bit in their early years in PhD, because I guess to learn how to do research, kind of we need to learn a lot of things at the beginning, right? So there will be certainly certain stage where we are struggling, and then before kind of knowing how to complete the research process. And so in my case, I think I had the first paper in maybe in the end of the first year or in the first half of the second year, and then the second paper was maybe in either end of third year or mid of fourth year. Yeah, at that time it was kind of difficult to maybe find the research problems, make progress on the research problems. But I guess that's fine for the PhD period, right? You have enough of time for you to struggle. Yeah, I don't know. I think kind of knowing how to do research is maybe, I don't know how to say, an kind of integrated skill, right? So maybe you are good at certain component, but not yet good at the other component. So the part that you are not good at may prevent you from kind of going through the whole process. You may stuck on some places, and I guess for different people, they would stuck on different kind of parts. For my case, I think maybe rather than saying the particular difficult part for me, maybe say like positively, I think I mentioned that I'm more of the kind of discussion style, right? So the reason kind of I focus more on crypto and also kind of getting better towards the end of the PhD was because I started to collaborate with Feng Hao Liu, who is also a faculty in the US now. And we had a lot of discussion, I think, starting in my 4th year. And that helped really a lot. And like we can go through the trying different new ideas and coming up with new ideas and attack the problem together. So so maybe my take would be that yeah, it's difficult to learn how to do theory research, but maybe a good strategy is to kind of try to know yourself a little bit better, and then to find the style or the strategy that's more suitable for you. Yeah. So in my earlier years, I also don't quite know how to discuss research problems with people, and maybe it's also not necessary that you have people with common research interest with you to discuss with. So at least in my case, that make it much difficult to make progress. So kind of it's hard to maybe quantify what's the most difficult part that I'm struggling with, but it's more clear that kind of in my case, the main reason that we can overcome it is because of having the close collaborators.
So, well, I don't know if the story necessarily tells anyone today something useful, but I mean, for me, when I started as a PhD student, the subject that we agreed on was coding theory and cryptography, and I was sort of doing a little bit of both, but I was sort of a little bit in a vacuum, in the sense that my advisor back then, Peter Landrock, was doing this kind of stuff, but we were the only two guys in the department at the time that was doing anything like this. So things weren't moving that fast, actually. And I wasn't sure whether I was going to do coding theory or cryptography or whatever. And then what happened was that I went to Amsterdam at some point to attend something called the crypto course, which was something that David Chung, who ran the crypto group in Amsterdam at the time, had organized. And this was the time, you have to remember, we're back in the 80s here. There was actually possible at the time to gather in one room pretty much everyone who knew something about cryptography. Strange as it may sound today, that was actually the case. So there were all the big names in the field were there, Goldwasser and Bicali, Oleg Bickel, you name it. And I was completely sold. I was sort of totally fascinated and immediately realized that I have to do this. Even if I didn't understand half of what these people were talking about, it was clear to me that this was infinitely fascinating. So for me, that was sort of a turning point that sort of immediately told me that this is my thing. And then everything just came naturally after that point in some sense. So I guess, I was just lucky being in the right place at the right time.
Well, I mean, that was actually quite late, maybe towards the end of my PhD, maybe even like in the last few months or so on, where I wanted to figure out what was going on. But in general, I think that during the PhD program, I had quite a few friends. I was doing other things and so on. So, research was always fun, but I think that I had some level of productivity that was going on. So I ensured, and I had collaborators and friends who I was working with. That stress in that sense never reached pressure cooker levels. So there's always some stress, but it didn't get too crazy. Another aspect I think is generally having lower expectations. I know we live in a world where everybody tells you to have higher expectations, but I try to lower the expectations for myself. And what that had an immense benefit in the sense that it didn't really matter if I did worse, right? Because I didn't have that high expectations. So because of that, I didn't have as much stress. So I think that we live in this world where everybody has high expectations from themselves and everybody tells them to have high expectations from themselves. But for me, the fact that I had lower expectations from myself helped me reduce stress. What was the worst thing that could happen? But that actually allows you to be somewhat ruthless in your approach, right? You can take risks. You don't need to worry about what's going to happen. You like something, you work on it. You don't like something, you don't work about it. I guess it's. I wouldn't say this was true during the faculty life, because there it's sort of like you're already a professor, and it's as if you have to do it. So there it was harder to live that, but certainly during my PhD, I could have a more what's the worst thing that could go wrong? And I think we're in the field we are in, like CS and within cryptography, are quite in demand, and so the worst is not that bad. So it's actually pretty amazing. So that always kind of helped alleviate stress.
I was the only student because my advisor just came. It was a new faculty at the time, so no one to talk to about research. It was just him. So it was very difficult. So so I went, for instance, I took classes at the Weizmann Institute, and then I met some students there. And my advisor sent me to abroad to other people labs so I can work there. So that's basically how we handled it.
So the hardest part, I think, was to figure out what I wanted to do. So I do cryptography now. That's not at all what was in my mind when I started the PhD. I really didn't know what to do, and I didn't know anything about cryptography. And it's something that I discovered during my second year of a PhD, taking cryptography classes with Shafi Goldwasser and Silvio Micali at MIT, and I really liked the area. And at which point I never considered doing research in that area before. I knew so little about it. And but then at the moment, then I had to decide to give a try, and I talked with Shafi about doing research with her under her supervision, and I was lucky enough to be taken as a student. And then from that point, it was all downhill. And I think that Shafi, my advisor, deserves most of the credit for making it easy. I think it was more Shafi than crypto itself, but at the same time, there's no Shafi without crypto. So yeah, it's really hard to think of Shafi in a world without cryptography. So the two things are somehow tied with each other. But yeah, the personality and also her ability to really give you the space that you need to develop as an independent researcher, and at the same time being there when you need it. I think she was really great doing that.
I think the hardest part during my PhD was the first 2 years. During these years, I was trying to find the topic that I really like. I was reading a lot of papers, learning new things. And I was also feeling frustrated because this process is not happening fast. And I was thinking that I do this for nothing. Although later I realized that my time was not wasted at all. And how did I overcome it? I guess I was patient enough to keep going with my research and motivated to succeed.
I think for me, one of the hardest parts was that I was interested in both working on the theoretical side of cryptography, but I felt kind of attracted to finding out how we can apply some of these techniques in practice. And this combination is often considered a risky approach to research because you might fall in between the two and not find compelling contributions or results. How did I overcome it? I just persevered, I guess. I just kept on working on different problems that were approaching the general area from different directions. So I did end up having papers that are purely theoretical and papers that are trying to kind of delve more deeply into the application side of things. Of course, once you start publishing papers, I think, and once you start having results, you start to become a bit more confident that there is a path to where you're trying to reach.
So I started my PhD in Aachen, in Germany, and that was in a group. And I wanted to do research in crypto, and I was also supposed to do research in crypto, but my supervisor was not doing research in crypto. So basically, we were two PhD students. That was at the time Michael Nerik and me, and we were trying to do crypto, but we didn't really have a supervisor who was also working in the field. And let's say this is not an ideal situation. You may be doing all kind of research to then just realize after months that somebody else had done this some time ago. You were just not aware of it. And you can't, as a starting PhD student, have the overview of the field to know what the really interesting questions are to look at the beginning. The way I overcame this is that after a little less than 1.5 years, I quit and changed to the University of Eindhoven. And then I had great supervisors who were very, and still are, very actively working in the field. And I think in that context, it is extremely hard, I find, when you're coming out of a master study to figure out where you should do a PhD. At least in Europe, the system is that the master, you do coursework, and then afterwards you write a thesis, but you're not very exposed to, say, international research community. Maybe somewhat, but not, you don't know all these people, right? And then figuring out where you should go, which groups are really good, who's good supervisor, and yeah, I think this is tough. And I would, as a piece of advice, I would say figure out what you want to do in your PhD, what you find interesting, and then find people who are really working in that field and contact them.
My hardest time was I tried to enter the field of leakage resilient cryptography without much background in theoretical cryptography. So what I did was trying to understand thoroughly the first paper in that field, titled Leakage Resilient Cryptography. It was a very dense and solid paper, so it takes me more than a month to understand the prerequisites and everything. There is a Chinese saying, reading 100 times, its righteousness comes out. So eventually I overcome the problem.
I had trouble finishing writing it.
Who helped you, Craig? Who got you over the finish line? Okay, it was really hard for you, wasn't it?
Yes. I don't know.
Why do you think it was so hard to write it?
I don't know. I was just doing it by myself. I don't like writing things up. I felt like I was done with it. I was tired of it already.
Ready to move on.
Okay, I believe that the hardest part was to get a feeling that you got started. I mean, finding the first question to work on, getting any kind of thing that looks like you're doing research. That's probably was the hardest part. Just not even getting started, not even doing research, just getting the feeling that you can do research and do something that's not just a homework exercise.
So what happened when you felt for the first time that this has happened? What was it? What made you feel that?
Honestly, I don't know. I mean, it's at some point there is a question that you think about, and you have some ideas of what to do, and then then I don't think that there was any kind of deliberate thing that I did. Well, it was a long time ago. I could just forgot about it, but I don't think that there was anything specific other than just do the same thing that you do when you do your homework, and take advanced this and that class and think of problems. At some point, one of the problems that you think about or talk about with your fellow students or something is going to be new enough to be publishable.
I was given a question by Azaria Paz, a professor in the Technion, and I was working on it, and I did some progress, but then, it was hard. I couldn't make more progress, and I was very frustrated. And then we had a visitor, Lenstra, Henrik Lenstra, not the Arjen Lenstra. And my advisor told him about this work I was doing. And he said, oh, of course, very, very famous problem. And he gave pointers. And then there were a lot of works by mathematicians on this problem, and with very little progress towards the question I wanted. So in 1 second, I moved from being stuck, no progress at, oh, that was great. It compares greatly with the state of art.
With what? It compares
the
greatly.
State of art on that problem.
I see. And did you ever solve it?
So I solved it partially also. The full solution was proven, done a few years after by Ravi Kannan.